Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I am your recruiting analyst and host, Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined as always by Mr. Ross Binder, managing editor of the site, and publisher Adam Jacoby. Before we get started, make sure that you hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening. You might be listening but not subscribed. So make sure you do that so you don't miss an episode, whether you're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And if you're on YouTube, drop a like, drop a comment, let us know how you're feeling. This is a safe space, Iowa fans, after that 20-19 last second loss to Iowa State today. And boy, was it an ugly one. Starting off 13-0 with that lead heading into halftime. Very well could have been 13-3. Very well could have been 21-0. But my number one gripe for this game, and I imagine you guys are on the same page. And Ross, I know you read it in my recap, well, my post game article. Iowa didn't step on the throat of Iowa State when they should have and or needed to, because Kaleb Johnson was freaking awesome in this game. Kaleb Johnson was the reason they led for a majority of the game, reason they probably should have won the game. When your running back, your lead running back has nearly 200 yards by himself and you lose, something's not right.
Yeah, the one of the things that really sort of jumped out to me as I was looking at the drive charts for this game, the the first time that Iowa had the ball inside the red zone, it was a first and goal at a long one. It was first in a long one, just as they were starting the second quarter, and the very first give that they gave, or their very first snap, was a give to Kamari Moulton, and he promptly lost 3 yards. And all of a sudden, right then and there, it went from first and goal at the 1 to second and goal at the 4. And that right then and there sort of changes the dynamics of what is sort of possible for your team in those situations. And sure enough, you look at how Iowa responded to that, and they tried some, I don't want to call it a gadget play, but it's pretty close to TJ Washington. And then they tried to just extend a play against that 8-man drop coverage defense on third down. Didn't work either. So one bad running play, and they just went away from it from that drive. And that's how you end up with 3 points instead of 7. And it happened twice. And the fact that they, missed on all 4 of those passes inside the red zone, 1, where you throwing 4 passes in the red zone, 2, if you understand that Iowa State is sort of selling out on that pass defense in those situations, guys, run the ball.
What did Cade say post game, Adam? Oh, they were dropping 8 in coverage, and we knew they were going to do that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And like we saw him check out of a different play. He checked into that run by Kaleb Johnson, that first score, that first touchdown. He checked into that outside
Yeah.
zone where he scored. You knew they were dropping 8 in the red zone when you were on the 4 and you didn't run the ball with Kaleb Johnson, who's a freaking tank. Yeah,
And
they were first and goal on the 1 and first and goal on the 3, and they didn't hand the ball to Kaleb Johnson once. Got him all the way down there. This tank of a
and
running back you have, and you don't run the ball when that's what you know is working. Let's get cute. Let's throw the ball on the 4-yard line when we know they're dropping 8. How does that make sense?
and the one thing that I'll add to this, and then we can sort of stop talking over Ross here, but Kaleb Johnson is running harder, or it ran harder certainly today. But even going back to the first game of the season, he's running a whole lot harder now than he was in his first 2 seasons as a Hawkeye.
Yeah.
And what did the coaches always say? when they were talking about why, he's not getting the lion's share of the carries. It's because they wanted to see him run behind his pads more. They wanted to see him use his physicality, that 6'0", 225 size that he's got. They wanted him to actually start using that. He has been using that. And even on the last drive of the game for Iowa, on that first down play, he ground for 7 tough yards, because most of that was after contact, and usually with at least, two, hands, ISU hands on him, and he was just dragging guys. And so he is starting to get it. And he's got the 25 carries, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns in this game to show for it too. And when they did give the ball to him in the red zone, it took what, 1 carry to score on what ended up being the last score of the game. He knows what to do in the red zone, and he knows how to use his physicality as a running back, even if he didn't think he could do it 2 years ago, which, he probably couldn't. It's there to succeed now. Ross, on TV, were the announcers, how much of a deal was made about Iowa's red zone struggles on TV?
Well, I mean, it was significant. It was a major talking point because it was such a glaring problem that they, could not get the ball in the end zone, despite being right literally on the doorstep of the end zone on that first drive in particular, when they had it 1st and goal from the 1. You said it was a long yard, and sure, but it's not that long.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was they flashed a graphic that Iowa had the 2nd worst red zone touchdown conversion rate last year. And new players this year to an extent, new coordinator, same issues in the red zone. I don't want to hammer it because Eliot's already done a good job of really doing that and underlining the problem. But there were about 6 to 8 plays Iowa ran inside the 5, with goal to go, and Kaleb Johnson touched the ball on not a one of those plays. And that's a completely baffling decision in a game where you guys both mentioned it. He was running as hard, I would say, as we've ever seen him run in an Iowa uniform, and just in terms of his physicality and his intensity and desire. Like, everything you wanted to see from him was on full display in this game and in his runs. And yet when the ball is right on the doorstep of the end zone, he doesn't get to touch the ball at all. There's just no way to make sense of that. To me, the offense's problems kind of ran into 2 areas. There was that one, and then the second area, which I guess we'll probably get to here in a second. But in the second half, they had literally one good drive, and that was it. They had a scoring drive, and beyond that, it was not quite all 3 and outs, but pretty close to all 3 and outs. Like, there was very little production in the rest of the second half, and that's, again, something we saw commonly last year. That was not an uncommon sight at all. But the story this season was, okay, Deacon's gone, Brian's gone, Cade's back, Tim Lester's here. Those things are a thing of the past. I guess they're not quite yet, because we just watched another second half that was every bit as abysmal as a dozen, plenty of second halves we watched last fall. Is that what it seemed like to you guys in the press box as well?
It's we have a lead. Now I'm nervous, you just go like nervous turtle. Like, what, why? It doesn't make sense. They went 3 and out 3 drives in a row, Ross, like you mentioned. You know how many yards they gained? 1 yard. It's like your junior running back is playing out of the. You guys might have to correct me here. I know he had a big game against Purdue, but would you say this is the best game of his career so far?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I mean, I think there's been I think he had more yards in that Purdue game probably, but whatever. In terms of the circumstances and everything, like, this was his best game as a Hawkeye for me, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, especially, sort of given the competition and, just really given the level of skill that he was putting on display. I'm not going to go back in the record books and see where this stacks up in terms of number of total yards, but given the defense that he was running against and giving the sort of the highlight value of some of its best runs, yeah, absolutely. And really, I think just to mention it again, the fact that it is more aligned with what the coaches have wanted to see from him his entire career, like this is the potential that they had always seen in him. And for it to ultimately be in a losing effort, and he did mention after the game that they all win and lose as a team, and Cade McNamara said the same thing, and all that. Like, I get it, but for all of that to just end up in 19 points, to right, like, how do you not get more production on the scoreboard when your running back is basically running at will?
If I was able to have a 200 plus yard, well, 187 is what he finished with, rusher, they should win like 99 times out of 100. And the fact that Kaleb was able to do that and Cade wasn't able to take advantage of them selling out on the run, 4 of 17 on his final 17 passes. Between the second, third, and fourth quarters, he was awful. That pass to Lachey, I mean, he threw the interception to the DB. I don't know what exact position he plays. Darian Porter from Bettendorf, which, by the way, he has the state record in the 400 meters from Bettendorf. He ran 46.9 a senior year. I was a D1 track athlete, and that would have kicked my ass. So Porter's got some serious speed. And then he had the safety on the back end who very well could have made the play. That was a terrible throw. Cade knew it. He said it post game. He's like, I should have just thrown that away. What? And the other thing too, there were opportunities for him to take off and run today that he either waited too long or just didn't do it. Adam, and you and I were saying that to each other multiple times in the press box. It's like, okay, make the decision. You have to make the decision when it's prompted to you. And like, credit to Iowa State too. Their DBs were awesome in coverage today. But at the same time, you know what else? In blaming the play calling, because this isn't all on Cade, right? Like it is a team effort.
Yeah.
And Tim Lester, I don't think he went to Kaleb enough. And that's part of putting, the foot on the throat, so to speak, of the opposing team. And maybe even bring in Jazz Patterson if the hard running's working, because Leishon and Kamari were not good today either. But you got to find a way to get your best player on offense the ball. Luke Lachey, not one catch today. You got to get him You got to get him matched up with some of those backup linebackers, because those second, third, fourth string linebackers that were out there, they were taking advantage of them in the run game. Clearly, now you got to do it in the pass game too. There were too many opportunities, too many different ways to attack the defense to lose this game and say it's what I just said, right? We have a 13-0 lead. It's playing to not lose. And the margin of error when you're playing to not lose is so razor thin. It's a freaking miracle they won 10 games last year for a variety of reasons. But this is one of those games where things just don't go the right way, because there were a bunch of shoestring tackles today too that could have been big plays, but they weren't. And when that happens, you got this incredibly thin margin of error, and then you lose on a last-second field goal by a freshman kicker who boots it 54 yards and drills it with ice in his veins. It's like things like that are going to happen. You might end up winning 10 games this year. You might, but you could have won 11. It's one of those things. And 10 versus 11 to the committee who determines who gets in. This is a maker. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, maybe you do call it a playoff or bust year with the schedule, but this is an opportunity pissed right down the leg when you had the lead for over 50 minutes in this game.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, Ross.
I was going to say, you're completely right, Eliot, but I also feel like talking about the playoff after how Cade just looked for 3 hours today is dicey.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. But
Playoff.
but you know what I'm saying,
Playoff.
though, right?
Yes. No, I completely get you. You're
Okay.
completely right. It's just like Iowa needs so much better play from Cade to have any
Yeah.
hope of the playoff. But you're right. The You mentioned the play calling, and those the three straight 3-and-outs. It was the same formula we've seen from Iowa for years, which is run, run, fail, fail, third and long, pass, incomplete, punt. And they just don't do anybody any favors. They don't do Cade any favors. They didn't do Kaleb any favors, having him run into a stacked box, because Iowa State at that point was like, okay, we're not letting Kaleb Johnson beat us. Like, we're going to commit, 9, 10 guys and, not let him get around us or anything. So at that point, you got to do something else. And Iowa's plan B was nowhere today in the second half.
One thing I definitely want to do when I go back and go back and watch the film, is I'm going to track how many play action plays they went to in the second half, because man, like when you're doing that, when you're stacking up, when you're selling out on the run against a talented running back like Kaleb Johnson, you have to make them pay. You have to make them pay. That's what playoff teams do. That's you make the makeables. It's a game of chess, right? And to be in a situation where you're not even going to move a piece, right? And because you're scared. I mean, I can't speak to the mentality, but like that's it's giving scared, if you will. Like that's I hate it. It's not fun it's not a good product, right?
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Unless you watch football for the complaining afterwards, and there's a few people that enjoy sports that way. In that sense, it was a very fun game, because it does not take a football PhD to understand where Iowa was leaving points on the board on Saturday. And when it's that obvious, and there are multiple plays, and guys, I mean, I even talked about it in the column that's going to be going up about 5 minutes after we hit stop on this one. But that interception that Cade threw to Lachey, the first one, not the Hail Mary one, although we can talk about the Hail Mary one too. But that interception that he threw, guys, let's remember, that was with Iowa up 13-0. The ball on the Iowa State 42-yard line after a 30-yard punt, after Iowa's defense had once again just absolutely wiped out that ISU offense on the first drive of the second half. Like, that was on the doorstep of really pushing this game into all over but the shouting. And instead, he tried to throw the ball into just an impossible window. Short, it was Porter. Long, it was safety help. Like, there was, you could tell that he was trying to throw the ball away from the safety, because all of Lachey's leverage in terms of where that ball could go was upfield. And then that safety was there, and all of a sudden you can't throw it upfield. But, great play by Porter to dive in front of that. McNamara said afterwards that he had started the play on the line of scrimmage and did a good job bailing out back. And like, okay, fine, but you can't throw that ball if you're not leading him into open space. And McNamara knows that. He copped to it after the game. He said, yeah, that was a dumb decision. I got to throw that away. Okay. But the whole Iowa offense is predicated on not making those decisions. And we're talking about a 24-year-old, 6th year, and I get that he's missed a lot of time, but he has not missed that time in the, film rooms. He's not missed that time with, first Brian Ferentz and now Tim Lester. That is a decision that a 6th-year quarterback, someone who's almost old enough to rent a car all by his lonesome in all 50 states, that's a decision that it is absolutely fair to expect better out of. And so, again, Cade has already copped to it. We're not telling any tales out of Sunday school here, but how does Iowa, I don't know, not do that again? And how many more times are we going to see a decision that bad? And how many times are we going to have a quarterback standing at the podium afterwards saying, yeah, I really wanted that one back? And how many more times is Kirk Ferentz going to be up there and saying, well, he missed a lot of time. Well, didn't all have all that prep time. Oh, we just have to take care of the football. How, like, all of this script sounds so familiar to last year with Deacon Hill. It sounds so familiar. And that no Iowa fan wants to go back to, those 10 games. Hashtag we're not going back. But, that is, Iowa fans are seeing the same playbook again, so to speak. And how much longer in 2024 is it going to be well, he missed a lot of practice time. Well, we gotta execute better, right? It all sounds familiar, guys.
I mean, I know Kirk is from the NFL and he misses having, a preseason and tune-up games for a team, but buddy, you've been coaching in college for 26 years also. Like, this is the game. Like, you got to be ready week 1. Iowa State is week 2. It's week 2 every single damn year. You got to be ready for it. And there were a lot of ways they did not look ready today, it seemed like to me.
And like to go back to that as like a talking point, essentially, like Adam, I imagine you'll agree with me here, and Ross too. At least this is what I've garnered in my year, coming up on 2 years on the beat, is Kirk has like references that he likes to make throughout the whole season, and he'll stick to it through the whole season. And this season, he missed a lot of time. And he wasn't quite game ready or something, whatever. I'm probably not quoting him properly there, but it was effectively that. And you know what that's gonna beg the fan base to say? Well, then why the hell was he on the field?
Right.
I mean, you have a guy who hasn't missed that same amount of time right there. He's right there. He wears number 1. His last name's Sullivan. Ever heard of him? And I'm
Well,
not like I'm not calling for Brendan to be the starter. Like that's not what I'm doing. And I made sure. I mean, it's just a really odd thing to say after you've just lost and Cade was that bad. Like, yeah, but he also played last week, and it's FCS, whatever, Illinois State. Like, if he's not ready, he shouldn't be out there. Like, and is he ever going to be ready?
well, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Eliot, you mentioned that, Ferentz says that, oh, he didn't have this, practice, didn't have this prep. But in the same breath, he then says, oh, but he's the quarterback that gives Iowa the best chance to win. And that's why, there's no consideration of Sullivan. It's like, well, which is it? He's not ready, or he gives them the best chance to win, or what? What's the deal here? Like, we can't have it every way. There's got to be a choice. It feels like.
The other thing too, about I do the nervous turtle thing. Are you nervous turtling, or are you making crazy throws to try to throw it across your body into double coverage? That's the other thing about that interception.
That's a throw that he should have learned not to make in like high school. Like,
Yeah. What do you?
Yeah.
What's the prerogative? Like what? I don't know.
Yeah, like I get that the play call design sort of necessarily means that you don't have a whole lot of time to look at that receiver and gauge how open he is, and you just sort of have to assume based off of, before you, take off and boot to the right, you have to sort of look at where the cornerback is and say, well, all right, well, I have an expectation of where he's going to be once I boot and turn back around. And so I think that's why McNamara was pointing out, yeah, the Porter did a good job of bombing back after starting to play on the line. Like, I get that. But again, clearly what really blew that entire play up was the safety coming over to help, because that's why you can't throw it deep. And you, as soon as you're looking downfield again after that play action, you should know that safety is ruining the play for you. That is a great play by Porter to make that pick. But either A, you knew that safety was there, and you knew that safety was taking away what's going to make that play successful, or B, chillingly, you didn't. And it was just a bad throw, and you threw it to the one guy who could throw it if you missed him, like close, as opposed to the guy that who was going to pick it if you missed it long. So, either way, again, you cannot throw that pass. And that is what kickstarted this whole game for Iowa State in the second half, because they had nothing going for them prior to that. Nothing.
That's a pretty simple read. Like you said, Adam, you see that safety, you throw it out of bounds. You do not throw it across your body when there's a safety on the back end who's reading, like, duh, duh. I don't know if he just didn't see him or what, but that leads me into, well, I don't know if he underthrew him or exactly. I'd have to rewatch it, but
He
they also
underthrew a
had
lot
an
of other balls.
What?
Yeah.
He underthrew a lot of other balls
That's
today.
what I was just gonna say. He had Caleb Brown deep for an easy tutty. Missed him. Last play of the game, he can't make the throw 50 yards.
That was concerning.
Was that a Hail Mary, or was he playing 500 or whatever? I mean, that was
If your
holy
quarterback,
cow.
if your quarterback can't make that throw, hook and ladder, like do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Something. I mean, Brendan Sol, take him,
That
get him warmed up, get his shoulder warmed up. If he can make that throw because he's fresh, like
that play looked DOA the second it left his hand. It was like, oh my God, there's no way from the way the ball looked, like there's no way this is getting to the end zone. So it's like, what is going on here?
it was just a duck. It was a duck right when it came out of his hands, and that was his second pick of the day.
Yeah, and it's not like Iowa was set up for that pass to only go 45 yards either, right? Like they weren't playing the tip drill, bounce drill, whatever you want to call the Northwestern special, or whatever you want to call it. I think Northwestern won a game using that back in the Randy Walker days. Yeah, it was before your time, Eliot.
Yeah.
But it's you can't even point to that as a, well, if the ball bounces this way, it works. No, I mean they were pretty clearly trying to get the ball into the end zone on that throw, and it wasn't close. And there are certain expectations you should have of a D1 quarterback's arm strength. And I don't think Cade's got a noodle arm. He's got some pretty good velocity, especially in that like 10 to 20 yard window. You got to get it to the end zone. You have to get it there. Even Deacon Hill, for all his warts and flaws, and they were numerous, much more numerous than Cade McNamara has, even Deacon Hill was going to get that thing to the end zone. Now, his track record would suggest that the ball would have cleared the end zone and become a public health hazard for everyone in row 8. But
I was gonna
that at the very least is better for trying to complete a Hail Mary than, it barely gets to the 10.
He would have thrown it through an Iowa State player's chest to one of his receivers. So
That I just wanted to that Caleb Brown miss was like a sneaky, really bad play for Iowa in the second half, especially highlighted by the fact that because the offense did so little the rest of the, on all those other drives, that like when you're running an offense effectively, that you only have a couple opportunities to like effectively move the ball or score, then that you really, really got to take advantage of those chances. And that was a big miss, and that really hurt by the end of the game, obviously.
to a couple other things that happened in to get today's game defensively, and then we can probably wrap up here. But Ross, Adam, and I saw that. I think it was Jaden Higgins' touchdown when TJ Hall was in coverage. And to us, from my vantage point, it just like looked like he mistimed it, and Jaden was an awesome receiver and snagged it. But I saw some photos and like a replay of it from the TV, and it looked like from the TV broadcast, and it looked like TJ had it in his hands, and Jaden just ripped it away from him.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. They had a really good replay that's what it showed, was that it looked like TJ did have actually pretty good timing. Got there, had good inside position. Looked like he had the ball. He had his hands on the ball. But yeah, Higgins just got his hands in there too and just pulled it away, and the last guy wins, I guess. And he got the touchdown. But I mean, that was some really good coverage from TJ. That was the other touchdown Iowa State got was a massive breakdown in coverage. But that one was good defense. But Iowa State, I give their receivers credit, especially like they have some real ballers in Noel and Higgins. And in the second half, those two guys came to play, and they made a lot of plays that unfortunately Iowa's defense was not able to counter very well. That was a shocker to me, really, was the second half. Like the offense going DOA, like, I mean, we're used to that having watched them the last couple of years. The defense giving up 20 points and several pretty good drives, and blowing a 13-0 lead, like that's a shocker. That does not happen often. And that was more surprising to me.
That last drive when they went into field goal range, there were a couple things that I noted when we were on the field. A lot of other people didn't really seem to make I don't know if a stink, didn't make anything of it, I guess. Except for Chad Leistico asked about it post game. Asked Kirk why he didn't call timeout right before they punted, and then Reese punts it to the 22. Like you take those 5 yards away from yourself, and then he punts it to the 22, and then Iowa just couldn't do anything against the Iowa State offense in that final minute and a half. Rocco just tore him apart.
Yeah, with the punt and the not taking the timeout, I wondered if they were trying to give Dakin 5 more yards to work with, which kind of backfired if that was the case.
Right.
And that was just not the good enough punt they needed in that situation. Tough spot to put your freshman punter in his obviously second game ever to, have him do that. This Rocco, like, yeah, I mean, first half Rocco was not very good. Second half Rocco was throwing some dimes, and I thought Iowa had trouble getting pressure on him, and that seemed to be one of the bigger problems on defense. Is that what it seemed like to you guys also?
Yeah, it certainly looked, especially in that second half, that Iowa State had figured out what a lot of teams in 2023 figured out, which is if your quarterback standing back there 5, 6, 7 seconds, he's probably going to get sacked, and you can't really wait for a receiver to get open against this defense. It's got to be something quick, probably something heading towards the boundary. And if you watch that play, the 30-yard catch for Noel that put them on the doorstep of field goal range, it was pretty obvious. Sebastian Castro was in coverage, and he mentioned after the game that ISU was running what they called like man beaters, to beat man zone. And it was pretty clear that Castro overcommitted to what was looking like a sideline out. Noel turns it into an out and up along the sidelines. Hell of a throw by Becht. At some point, you really have to say, hey, look, there was one place that he could have thrown that ball to make that a really devastating play, and he threw it exactly there. And, QB playmaking can be the difference between an interception / incomplete pass / drive ending play and something like that. And we saw that last week against, I almost called them Northern Illinois. But Illinois State, thank you.
There you go.
I almost called them Western Illinois after that, like not better. No, we saw that against Illinois State, and a couple of those throws that McNamara was able to make, essentially throwing guys open. And, Beck basically threw Noel open after that double move, and the timing was fantastic too. Like QB playmaking, arm talent playmaking matters. And we saw that especially in this game too. And, just going even all the way down to the final play, the fact that McNamara could not put the ball in position for his players to, at the very least attempt some sort of miracle catch, right? The fact that he wasn't able to get the ball where it needs to be for it to be effective with the game on the line is sort of emblematic of how Iowa came up short in this one. And again, in my column that's going to be going up basically as soon as we're done here, so many opportunities for the Hawkeyes to put this one away, and just so many failures when it mattered the most. And that is what it takes to lose by one, right? Like that is sort of the difference between victory and defeat in especially in a game like this, where that Iowa State's going to do something crazy. That they are going to pull the best out of what they do. And not because, it's their Super Bowl, blah, 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 but it's a rivalry game. Like, this is what guys get up for. That's not an Iowa State thing. It's not an Iowa thing. It's not a Big Ten Midwest thing. It's college football. Guys get up for their rivalry games. Iowa State got up for this one, especially in the second half, especially as soon as they had a motivational play like that interception that started that second half for them. As soon as they had a reason to believe, they stepped their game up. Iowa did not match that. And that's how you lose a game like this instead of winning it.
Eliot, one of the conversations on our premium board earlier this week was about what positions was Iowa State better than Iowa at. And there was a lot of back and forth. But I think today pretty conclusively proved there were two positions where Iowa State was a lot better than Iowa, and that's quarterback and wide receiver. And that made a huge difference in this game. And yeah, Iowa could not close that gap, and that was painfully obvious in the second half.
One might say it was the difference in this game. And Adam, I'll go to you here, but I only have one thing to say left. Yeah. I'll share once you're done here, Adam.
Well, all I was going to say is not only was Iowa State superior at quarterback and wide receiver, but they were more apt to be able to make plays to win their matchups. And we are talking about the Phil Parker defense. We are talking about Sebastian Castro in the Iowa secondary. Like we are talking about guys that are as battle tested and as proven as just about anybody in college football. And so that's not to say that, Becton, Noel, and Higgins are, good enough to beat anybody in college football or anything like that. Like I'm not, making the case that, no, that was a Heisman QB. No, it wasn't that. But the fact is that they were able to make plays against an elite defense. They made Iowa look a little bit less than elite. We can put it that way. And when Iowa was going up against what is a strong Iowa State defense, let's not get that twisted. Like they also held North Dakota to 4 yards per pass too. So at the very least, Cade McNamara's got a little bit of company there. But the fact that Iowa, especially in that second half, was not able to consistently win any of these one-on-ones, was not able to extend drives with any sort of regularity. That is concerning, because you look up and down the Big Ten, and this is an easier schedule for Iowa in the Big Ten than most. You look up and down that Big Ten, there's a good defense. There's a good defense. There's a good defense. There's a good defense. Iowa State would probably be a top half defense in the Big Ten, of course, but this is far from the last time we are going to see Iowa go up against a tough secondary or a tough front four. Like, guys, it's the Big Ten. Get used to this. And Cade McNamara especially should know at this point in his career that it's not going to get a whole lot easier than what Iowa State put on the field the rest of the way, especially after you get past Troy.
Last thing I have to say before we get out of here. This all happened in front of some very high priority recruits today. Luke Brewer, Landon Bloom, two of the top prospects in the state in 2027. Colin Witters, who has an offer from both Iowa and Iowa State, Iowa City West offensive lineman. There are some mutual interest recruits that were at today's game and they saw the difference between these two programs. One played to win, one played not to lose. And that's how it shook out today. So we shall see how some of those recruiting battles shake up over the next year, 2 years for those that were in attendance today. But we will wrap it up there. I am Eliot Clough, recruiting analyst here for the site. We appreciate you tuning in. Once again, do not forget, you might be listening but not subscribed, whether you're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or YouTube. If you're on YouTube, drop a like, drop a comment to let us know what you're thinking. Again, safe space here. Vent away. Don't dislike the video because you're upset with the result of the game either. Just hit like because you listened and you like our podcast. Again, we appreciate you.
And because you agree with everything we said.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah. And literally everything. And we appreciate you hopping on. If you're not a premium subscriber yet, we got a ton of intel coming on men's basketball official visitors and unofficial visitors. All the kids who are on campus today for visits for football as well. All of that's going to be flooded to our message boards in our premium content. So don't miss out on that. Again, it's iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. Of course, we're going to be talking to people behind the scenes throughout the season as well. See how things are going with the football program. And of course, basketball, women's basketball right around the corner. So stay tuned with us there at Hawkeye Beacon. We appreciate you staying tuned with us here on HawkCast. For now, I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Adam Jacoby and Ross Binder. And we will see you next time.